Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. Welcome back to you too, Kenny. How are you?
Kenny, good. Thanks, Bruce. You well?
Not too bad. No, Kenny Rogers. You've got
Kenny Rod. I thought you were going back to the episode about people's names. I thought you were referring to the little exercise you're doing about how to input. Yeah, okay.
It's actually good to see that you listen. So well done. So, but do you know when to hold them, when to fold them, when to walk away, when the dealing's done? You're looking Kenny Rogers like. It's hard to portray on podcast, but
I don't have the snow white hair at the top, but yes, it's coming or it's going. It's one or the other. There's a big solar system up there now.
Very good. Yeah, no, we found your hair. It's on your chin. So, hey, mate, how's the footy going? Like, are you going to make the finals?
Oh, well, all of the teams underneath us have stumbled a little bit. Like GWS's loss was a big surprise to Adelaide, and Melbourne stumbled, and Carlton almost stumbled too, but they just got over the line. So, look, who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, I believe in the boys. Got a lot of belief that if they get there, I think they'll hopefully cause a bit of drama.
I've got a question for you about Collingwood.
Yeah. What's that?
So is there any link, do you think, the fact that the great Fremantle player Justin Longmuir was at your club recently and you're doing all right, and then this year he's left,
right?
And you're not doing so well this year? Do you reckon?
Nothing to do with injuries, you don't think? Like, come to our star players?
Just thinking maybe. And Fremantle's gone up the ladder. You guys have gone down. He's moved over to the other side of the fence. I'm just throwing it out there.
Right, yeah. I'll bring you a stat next week that I think will, rock your socks off around the Collingwood Football Club. But
I'll be waiting for that.
A couple of weeks ago, something very special happened.
Let me put it in the diary, mate. That's something I'll look forward to. A little tidbit about the Collingwood Football Club. So very good. Hey, today we're going to riff through a little bit of a conversation between you and me. It's called the 3 Money Rules for Life, Ben. But before we get there, I want to talk about the audio book, Ben. It's finally available.
Oh, nice. Round of applause for the audio book. Actually, no, I've got my little, here we go, ready? Audio book.
Well, let's just keep that round of applause going for poor old Stig, because it has been a editing monumental mountain for her to climb. So, but she's done a terrific job, right? So Ben, here's the deal. The audio book is best supported by having the actual physical book, because our book's not like a fiction book where there's a story and you can just tune out. You actually need to be referring to graphs. You need to be referring to pictures and all those sorts of things. Yep. So it's a perfect accompaniment, if I got that word right, accompaniment to the actual physical copy of the book. So what I thought is, with the launch of the audio book, I said, I'll talk to you. I said, let's go and buy a heap of copies from our publisher. Yep. And you can confirm they landed in the building yesterday, right?
I can confirm there's a few books here.
There's a few books there, right? So here's the deal. What you need to do is you need to go, folks, if you're interested. We're working with Audible and all of those providers, Ben. That's a little way off for us. We're still getting that. But for the early adopters, what they can do is they can go to thearmchairguide.com.au, Ben. They can get a free copy of the Armchair Guide paperback version, Ben. We'll send it to them. All we say is you pay for postage, you tell us where to send it, we'll send it to you. Yep. And then when you're going through that process, Ben, you'll actually be able to upgrade to get the audiobook. So the audiobook includes the audiobook, also includes the Kindle version, Ben. So we've given you it's an EPUB file. There's also the PDF version, Ben. There is also a supplemental PDF that comes with it. So there's a big bundle that's going with the audiobook. So therefore you'll have a physical copy of the book, you'll have all the digital versions of the book, and you can also put it in your earbuds. So we'll circle back to that at the end, Ben, but you go to thearmchairguide.com.au, and a special thanks to Ivis, who's put in a special effort behind the scenes to make that available.
Thanks, Ivis. Great job.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. Check that out. Hey, a couple of things, Ben. You've got a webinar with
putting my
Prince of Adelaide.
picker hat on, and Peter Kalousos, the property professor. So our audience, our community, and also the picker community and the Pippa community did a recent sentiment survey with a snapshot of the market. And so they're going to get an exclusive insight running in terms of what the data showed and suggested. So over 1,000 responses again this year for the Pippa survey. So it's really interesting in terms you're going to learn what Peter's interpretation of those are. So, what are people's views about property prices, where to buy, and what other things are faring well during this time or not going so well, in terms of that. So, yeah, it's going to be next Wednesday night at 7:30. But all the details will be in the show notes, so you can get to the link. It's obviously exclusive for Picker members. So if you're a Picker member, you will receive the invite to come along to that. So, and if you're not a Picker member, then you won't be able to attend, unfortunately. But you get to hear from Peter Kalousos, who is the property professor. So I'll be hosting Peter next Wednesday night for a chat about the survey results.
Friend of the couch, also a friend of Picker, so that's great. Details will be in the show notes. I'm also I'm hosting that with Antonio Mercarella. We've got Eliza Owen from CoreLogic. We've got Cool Singh from REA, who's going to give us some insights. Also, Ben, around what they're seeing on the platform. So, and I'll be riffing back and forth with Antonia about what's going on in the Sunshine State, what's going on with real estate in the Sunshine State, and is it a great place for you to be consider putting your property-related dollar into that market. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Good
so
stuff.
Check that out.
I'll check that one out too.
Very good. Hey, my Mindset Minute, Ben, is a continuation of this very, very good book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I am going to go through the fourth way, Ben, out of the six to make people like you. Just a quick recap. First way, Ben, is to become genuinely interested in other people. The second way, Ben, is to smile. The third way is to remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language, which you referred to at the top of the show, Ben, which shows that you do listen to me. So chapter 7 is the fourth way, Ben, an easy way to become a good conversationalist. And this particular chapter had loads of anecdotes, which was really great, Ben. So it started with story after story after story, which is why Dale Carnegie is such a great author. Every one of his books I have read. That's probably not true. He's probably done scores of them, but there's about 4 of them that I've read, and his writing style is amazing. Now, I'm going as I've been doing, Ben, I'm just going to pick out a couple of bits out of the chapter that I think is important. So,
nice. Here we go.
You want to know how to make people shun you and laugh at you behind your back and even despise you. Here is the recipe, Ben, and I quote. All right, but 1937. So don't shoot the messenger, Ben. But if laugh at you behind your back and even despise you, here is the recipe. Follow the Collingwood Football Club. No, I made that up.
Well, here's right. People are jealous of success. That's obviously true.
Here's the recipe, Ben. Here we are. We're pivoting to the truth, not fiction there. Never listen to anyone for long, Ben. Talk incessantly about yourself. If you have an idea while the other person is talking, don't wait for him or her to finish. Bust right in and interrupt in the middle of a sentence. That is the recipe to get people to talk and laugh behind your back and even despise you. People who only talk of themselves think only of themselves, Ben. So if you aspire to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested, Ben. Ask questions that the other person will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that the people you are talking to are 100 times more interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems, Ben. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in China, which kills 1 million people. A boil on one's neck interests one more than 50 earthquakes in Africa. Think of that next time you start a conversation, Ben. So here it is, the principle number 7. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves, Ben. How do you like those apples?
I've got some work to do there, Bryce. Let's be honest about that. I've got a little bit of work to do. I like to interrupt people if I've got a thought. Sorry about
while
that.
You're talking, I just wanted to say something.
No.
You're a good listener. As long as we're talking about Collingwood, you are dialed in.
Yeah. I've got to be interested in the subject matter. That is true. If someone wants to tell me about their puppy dog down the road and the trick that it did on the weekend. I struggle. I've got to be honest. I struggle, and I've got to work on myself. None of us are perfect, but I do struggle with sort of mundane conversations sometimes. Don't know what it is about me, but I've got to do better. I've got to do better at that.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. What were we saying? I just wasn't listening. So I'm sure there was wisdom in it anyway. But there you go, folks. Principle number 7: be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Now, Ben, I've got a life hack. I'm pulling this life hack out of the archives, Ben. So tune in for that, because it directly speaks to principle number 7 on be a good listener, encourages others to talk. I'm going to give you a formula on how to do it, Ben. Straight out of the archives.
Oh, I love it.
It's 4-letter F word that landed me a job in television, Ben. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, I know you've used it plenty of times. I love it. It's a good one.
Stick around for that. So there you go. Hey, Ben, our central theme today is the 3 money rules for life. And obviously we have provided frameworks and tactics and mindset and a whole bunch of things over the journey of our 303 episodes. But today I really wanted to, I put the challenge out to you and to me to say, can we sum up the money rules for life into 3? And we've had a go at it, Ben. 3.
Yeah. Whether it's 3 or not is well, we'll let the audience, the community decide. But it's been fun.
It's 2.5.
Oh no, I reckon it's a lot more.
That's right.
But that's all good, like at the end of the day, it's all about, teaching and educating where we can and giving our observations.
Giving our best as best we can. So let's have a go at it. I'm looking forward to it. But rule number 1, Ben, is do the hard things early. Do the hard things early. What I loved about, if you haven't listened to Scott Keck last week, I certainly recommend you go and circle back in a hurry and go and listen to it. But do you remember the bit at the end of the conversation, Ben, where he goes, oh, the young people today, they just say it's so expensive to afford a house, but leaning against their Maserati with their Armani suit saying, they can't afford it, right? So this really plays into the fact that the early, I don't want to discourage anyone who's starting late, right? Because for most people, it's never too late. For some people, it is. For a lot of people, it's not too late. But to be honest, Ben, when I was thinking about this rule, I actually don't find this difficult at all, to be honest. I think my dad worked 2 jobs. I've said this before. He was born in 1939. He was obsessed with paying off his home as quickly as he could. And so he did 2 jobs. He worked on Saturdays, and he wanted to pay his mortgage off quickly. I think he did it in about 8 years, Ben. So I actually got to see it first up, particularly during the recession that we had to have. I saw my parents do it. I never, ever saw my parents fight about money, ever. And I know your backstory's different. What I did see is I never once thought that the light bill would never be paid. I never once thought that we wouldn't have enough to make our means, to make ends meet. But we certainly, my dad modelled what the sacrificing looked like early. But I understand that that's not common. There's the pole opposite of that, and then there's everything in between. But I think one thing is undeniable, that the earlier you can do the hard things, the quicker. You've got a saying which I really like, Ben, is you're going to have to put 40 years in. Whether you put the 40 years in starting in your 20s or you put the 40 years in starting in your 50s, you're still going to have to put the 40 years in.
So it's the 40 for 40, right? It's a principle that just says you got to put those yards in sensibly. That means you can still live very comfortably, but if you have that rule, you're going to basically be financially independent. That's real. If you work 40 years and you do just more sensible things than irrational things, you will retire financially free. That's a given. Even on low incomes, that would still be achievable so long as you invest. For those people, like you're saying before, for some people it might be too late. It's still never too late to develop new habits around managing the money that you do have. And I think, when we talk about money, what we're talking about here and what has always been part of our cause, Bryce, is to just educate people that your money can make you more money. That is, So once you understand the power of compound interest, and then you sort of say to yourself, wait a minute, if I keep my money and I put that money to work, it can make more money for me. Well, that's a pretty powerful concept. It doesn't feel like it's doing a lot really quickly, but we talk about effectively spend less than you earn. So if you spend less than you earn and then you put that money to work, then that is the starting points for greatness. And then if you understand that you can also become a good money manager through better cash flow management, you can then potentially explore the idea of leverage, which means you're controlling a bigger asset base. And if you're controlling a bigger asset base, you get a better cash on cash return. All of a sudden, your potential and your opportunity puts you in the driver's seat for results. And I cannot stress that enough for people in terms of what that looks like. So if you think about, what is the strategy is easy. The strategy is about basically exactly what we just talked about. And now we talk about it in our framework of ABCD, asset selection, borrowing power, cash flow management, defence. In terms of what we're doing, we talk about it in regards to our Money Smart system, in terms of getting a money management system that you can manage and getting control of your money. And then it's about, not leaving any money on the table, being efficient with your money and making it work harder for you. That is not rocket science. But I can tell you, Bryce, that, there's three examples, right? There's three examples, and I'm being very generalistic here, right? So, and I always want to be, I always put a caveat there on how generalised I am. But if I can summarise, there's a group of people that I call the battlers, right? And their human condition around money is that it's always been hard fought, and they can't keep it when they get it, and they live paycheck to paycheck or month to month. And unfortunately, life's a battle for them, right? And there's potentially, some vices in there as well, because they're looking to get ahead, so they might have gambling issues, they might have some addictions around alcohol and tobacco. And so I still think the battlers have an opportunity to break their conditioning around money and their money mindset. But there's a group of people, and they look for others for their solutions rather than, as Jamin Fraser would say, do the work on themselves. Then you've got the aspirers, who are, who's really our community. These are the people who, the conversations we're having with them right now, it aspires, they can relate to it. They can understand that, they want a certain quality of life and lifestyle, and they understand that there's opportunity and potential. They don't have all the answers. So that's where, we'll be talking about that later in today's episode, but they realise that, as you say, these things are hard earned, right? So, you've got to do the hard things early, because the earlier you start, the greater your chance of your money compounding is. And, the final group that I talk about are the pretenders, right? And these are the people who show up flaunting life and lifestyle. But if you dig a little deeper, it's driven by credit, debt, car loans,
shallow,
personal
it's a
loans.
shallow pool.
It's a shallow pool, and they're trying to, they're playing a very dangerous game with themselves in terms of showcasing, their successes, but it's not built on any good foundations, and that house of cards will eventually come down. So, what are we saying here about do the hard things early? What we're saying is that you do have to make some sacrifices. You do have to, have that delayed gratification story, don't you, Bryce?
Yeah, you do, Ben. I think if you think about the obvious example is, if you want to learn a language, Ben, my kids are learning French at the moment. They can riff off a whole bunch of stuff, and their vocabulary grows over time, and it's easier earlier than it is to try and learn a language. Like I'm forever starting on the guitar, Ben, but you see these young kids who do it at school. So the earlier that you start something, usually, general statement here, usually it becomes easier, right? So it's that old saying that someone's sitting in the shade net today because someone planted a tree 20 years ago. It's kind of within that philosophy as well. And Ben, I think along this, if you a lot of people who are listening to this have adopted our Money Smart system, right? And there is a shock that, and this often isn't said when we're promoting that you should use the Money Smart system. There is a shock that you need to press on through, because if you have a look at our Money Smart system, Ben, 7 steps, set up your banking, simplify everything. Like, to be honest, it is primary school level, the system. So you kind of think, why is it difficult? It's because when you're used to being a little loose with your money, Ben, or if you're used to just on the weekend just putting things on your credit card, when you actually go through the process and put the system in place, and then the implementation of the system, that can actually be a jolt to the system, right? And I would describe those first 4 weeks when you are implementing Money Smarts, I would describe that as hard. It's hard. You've got to reprogram your mind. You've got to have a 7-day float. You've got to realize, do I really want this? Do I actually want to trap that surplus at the end of the month? All of these things are what people have to go through to get through to the other side. And if you circle back to our summer series we did at the beginning of the year, Ben, there's loads of people that push through and have got enormous transformation from doing that. But it doesn't disguise the fact that money rule number 1 is do the hard things early. So the earlier that you can adopt the Money Smarts and the earlier you can go through that messy middle where you are being challenged, you do have to check in with your life partner if you're sharing it with someone else where they might be a bit wobbly, you might be a bit wobbly, and you're trying to get back on track. Those things, there's no sugarcoating it, Ben. That's hard. No. But just on the other side of that, there's just tremendous fruit.
Tremendous. I mean, James Clear sums it up beautifully when he says the things that take the longer period of time are your greatest achievements. They are the ones you will be the most proud of and be recognised for. So that delayed gratification, building those habits around that big goal to achieve that will be, one of your greatest accomplishments.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, we had a friend growing up, Ben, when I was younger. We called them auntie and uncle, even though they were mum and dad's friends. Did you do that? Did you call someone auntie and uncle when they weren't auntie and uncle?
I've got a couple of mates who their kids call me Uncle Ben, and so that's
Uncle
part
Kenny.
of the tradition.
Yep.
Uncle Kenny.
Yep. I had Uncle John and Auntie Jean, right? So it was interesting because the comparison was so stark that my dad was prepared to do the early stuff in terms of we bought our house, bought our land, we built the house on it back in 1987. Mum and Dad still live there in a suburb called Bibra Lake over in Perth, Ben. And what was interesting is in parallel, Mum and Dad's friends, they found that really difficult to buy their house, Ben, because they like to go on a holiday over to Southeast Asia every year. That was their jam. That was their thing, right? But my dad sort of said to them over time, they encouraged them to buy a house, and they did, because buying a house, putting a castle, like my dad's generation, that is rock solid, right? That's what you do. And so he encouraged them. But what happened is to do that, they had to make the sacrifices, Ben, and they couldn't do these holidays each and every year. Yeah. And they did not like that. And I remember thinking, but that's what you got to do. But they didn't like it, Ben. So they stayed in their house for a couple of years. And eventually they sold it. They went and rented a property so that they could then continue to do their holidays each and every year. But I then saw the contrast through the later years of their life, and rest their souls, they have now departed us. But there was a lot of struggle towards the end, Ben, just to keep the roof over the head. So that is just burned in my mind. And really rams home this principle of doing those hard things early, because these things are difficult, but there is fruit on the other side. So
there is.
There you go, folks. Rule number 1: do the hard things early.
Yep. If you're in your 40s or 50s, that if you're going to live to 100, still early enough. So don't think this is this is not a masterclass for millennials. This is a masterclass for attitude about how young you feel and your potential and opportunity into the future. So just be mindful of that. Don't give up on yourself. Even if you're in your mid-50s, there's still massive opportunity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. So rule number 2, Ben, life is not a Disney movie. Nobody's coming to rescue you. What? Is this true? Is this true? Let's let that land, Ben. Life is not a Disney movie. Nobody's coming to rescue you. You often say if it's to be, it's up to. If it's to be, it's up to me. You got to plan to become what you plan to become. But in my own story, Ben, I grew up on almost the wrong side of the tracks, right? Like when you talked about Battler, I grew up in a Battler family. where I had to change some of the mindset around the battler stuff. But I lived in a suburb, Ben, called Bibra Lake, and I went to school at Leeming Senior High School. So I had to ride to school on the other side of the freeway, and you could see a noticeable difference in the demographic of Leeming compared to Bibra Lake. Bibra Lake's a great suburb, no disrespect to anyone there, but Leeming is just a little step up, right? So I always felt like I was Ben, have you heard of the Fremantle Doctor over in Perth?
I know it well.
Which is the wind, right? So I used to ride east in the morning to school, which over in Perth you get this really strong easterly in the morning, and then you think, oh, how good is this in the afternoon? I got it behind my back. No, it's cruel over in Perth. Then the Fremantle Doctor comes in about 3 o'clock. You knock off at school about 3:15, so give me a 15-minute warm up. So then I have to ride home into the very strong sea breeze, which is the Fremantle Doctor. But then I saw that and realised that as soon as I saw some of the people that my parents hung around was on the lotto life, like lotto and scratchies and all those sorts of things, was something that I saw a lot. And then I worked at the Burswood Casino, which is now the Crown Casino, Ben, and I saw people trying to get red or black or get someone to rescue them based on a hand that they would get via gambling. It really rammed it home for me that this is something that you got to get yourself. It's not something that's going to come along and deliver you a little golden ticket.
No, it's not. And I mean, I don't like to be political all the time, but I can tell you, the government of the day, I don't care which colour they are, will not come and rescue you.
No.
You're in it by yourself. Yes, we have seen. Let's look at the current example, right? The pandemic. The federal government and the states government have done a terrific job in putting a safety net in place.
Mm-hmm.
That was called for. I think everyone agreed that all levels of government did a terrific job of putting that safety net in it, and that's what really governments are there to do. They're there to basically give a government assistance and try and help as many as they can. But if you are reliant on your government of the day at any level, you will be disappointed, not just on one occasion, but on hundreds of occasions throughout your course of your life. Mm-hmm. So the point being is, don't rely on them. They are not there to rescue you. Your parents, in a way, are there to teach you, how to build the life box of living and how to survive. And I'll use the example of every year when NAPLAN comes around or something like that, there's a lot of protests around how it's difficult and how some schools are doing it this way to try and manipulate the scores or give their schools a better reputation and all that. And kids get anxious about their NAPLAN scores and all. True, but I tell you what, Bryce, here's a little message for everyone. Life's a competition, right? Unfortunately, you will have anxiety in your life. You will have to compete with others. You will have to compete to win a job. You will have to put your best foot forward in terms of how you compete in sport. You will, so if we don't build resilience and if we don't build this understanding that, that there is accountability in terms of where you're at, and let's be honest, I'm not saying NAPLAN's perfect, God, by any stretch of the imagination, but don't you want to know where you sit? Don't you want to know where your status is? Don't you want to know where you can improve? Like the principle is what I believe in, which is basically we do need to take stock. We do need to check in on our financial situation. We do need to check in on our health. We do need to check in on our relationships. We do need to continue to do that ongoing hygiene that keeps you moving forward and keeps you growing. Because if you're not growing, Bryce, you're dying. And that is a big story there. So it's that classic, get busy living or get busy dying story, because if nobody's going to come along and save you in that story, only you are going, and the work you do on yourself is going to matter in terms of how you can improve that story.
The dream of a rescuer, Ben, who will deliver us, may offer a kind of comfort, but it leaves us passive and it leaves us powerless, Ben. So that is not a place to be. So despite the fairy tales, or particularly the endings that we see on screen. No one is coming in real life, Ben. Nobody is magically coming down from the sky to give us the magic key that unlocks the code. No one is coming to make life right for us, and no one is coming to solve our problems, Ben. So if nobody's coming to save you, then by conclusion, you must save yourself, right? So, one of our advisors, Rachel Cole, she was a guest on our podcast back, I think it was 170. Don't quote me on that. Ivis might put the details in the show notes. But she's got this saying, Ben, which I really like, that represents her personality. She says, man is not a financial plan. And if you speak to Rachel, she's very, very good at managing her money. She understands where she's going, and she's got a clear direction. So she definitely subscribes that no one's coming to rescue you theory. And, there's stories around for us fellas too, putting your head in the sand. That's not a plan. That's not going to help you at all as well. And working harder is not going to solve it either, because working smarter is what you've got to do. So, yeah.
I think there's 3 points there, Bryce. The realization that I had, and fortunately I had it relatively early, was you do need to do the work. You do need to get the education. And, the final piece of the puzzle for me was around, where do I get that education? Where do I get that guidance and advice from? And that's, if you're talking about thinking about those things, you're well on your way to effectively solving the puzzle that is, financial peace, in terms of changing your financial story and understanding your money situation and ultimately where you want to get to in terms of financial freedom.
Yeah, nice. Hey, Ben, I've come to a conclusion from reading scores of personal development books, doing courses, mixing with sharp minds, the works as much as I can. I've come to the conclusion, Ben, that there's 2 skills you need in life to succeed, and in any endeavor, that is. First one is you need to be able to solve problems, and the second one is you need to take action. And that's it. If you're a problem solver and you can take action, you are going to put yourself into the minority who actually get on and do things, compared to the majority who don't know how to problem solve, or know how to problem solve but don't take action. You sign off all the time around the fact that knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. You give a hint each and every week. But that's my conclusion, Ben. If you know how to problem solve, you know how to take action, you really will be the antithesis of this rule working for you, because you don't believe someone's coming to rescue you. You're actually going to make your own destiny yourself. So so that's my take on rule number 2.
They're beautiful. Go back and listen to those 2. I'll throw while we're at it, I'll throw my 2 in there, which I've always talked about as well, which is very similar to yours, Bryce, in regards to decision making, and I just call it judgment calls. You're going to have to make judgment calls, right? Throughout the course of your life, there's going to be sort of sliding door moments. There's going to be things, some of them are easy to make, some of them are more difficult to make. Being informed on making those judgment calls, because the other consequence is there's also going to be trade-offs, and so I'm like you, it's decision making, and there is going to be some consequences or trade-offs, right? So if you think about it that way, but a lot of people don't do the work in terms of really exploring what those consequences are and those trade-offs are. They do very little thinking about it and make spontaneous decisions, which are, hugely consequential. When we bring this back to money, this is what happens with battlers and those people who are pretenders, is that they are looking for instant gratification or short-term fixes to a bigger problem. The aspirers understand that it takes time. And if you make more clear judgment calls in the right direction and you understand the trade-offs that you are making, then you're going to be really well served.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. So there you go. Rule number 1 for your money life is very simply, Ben, do the hard things early. Rule number 2 is life is not a Disney movie. Nobody's coming to rescue you. Rule number 3, Ben, is find your Yoda. And for those who are not Star Wars fans, Ben, Yoda is essentially the person who is the guide to Luke Skywalker. In a previous Earlier movie, it could have been Obi-Wan Kenobi, but really Yoda is the older, wiser person that is guiding Luke Skywalker to ultimately take action and lead towards the promised land, right? So I think it's really important that you find your Yoda, the person who's going to give you that wisdom. Now, we've said this a lot, Ben, and for those people who haven't listened to every podcast, it's easier than ever to find your Yoda these days, because I'd love to know the stats if Apple would give it out. They probably have, but there has to be 100 new podcasts coming out per week, at least, you would think, on all manner of topics, which includes financial literacy, right? So, money is taboo in households. We're on a mission to try and eradicate that and get people talking about money, but we never spoke about it at home. And without the correct Yoda for me, I derailed a little bit on the Gold Coast, and I'm happy to talk about that story. But the strategy of why you need a Yoda, why you need a guide, why you need a mentor is very simply, if heroes could solve their own problems, Ben, they would never get into trouble in the first place. Can you imagine going to a Hollywood blockbuster where the hero didn't get into trouble, didn't need any help, everything sailed smoothly? Yeah. It would be a box office flop, right? So if heroes could solve their own problems, Ben, they wouldn't get into trouble in the first place.
Yes, the best heroes, as we know from the studies, Bryce, are the millionaires next door, don't we, right? Whose stories may be a little bit more boring, but a lot more reliable in terms of the results that they're getting as well. So you don't have to be at the depths of despair. You don't have to be, a rags to riches story. What we're sort of talking about is, that Australia that we love and enjoy, which is about, a quality of life, great friendships, opportunities to see Australia and see the world, whatever it is that floats your boat, right? That you lived a fulfilled and purposeful life. They're the people we're talking about. And hey, Bryce, you notice something about this podcast? We haven't talked really about money at all. Like, even though these are, we haven't done the concepts of organise your money into jars and all, because we've got all that content. That is all there. That's all in our backstory. We've got the Money Smart system and all of those types of things. What we're giving you here is a broad framework, a 30,000-foot view of where the world looks like. But here's the problem, Bryce, that there are so many challenges, right? Because, there are so many experts everywhere that are surfacing. And now I've got the internet, Bryce, and I've got social media. So, back in the day when we were learning our craft in terms of understanding property and how it worked and the intrinsic value in it and the scarcity element to it and the land to asset ratios and the owner occupier appeal and the practicality tests and all of those things that we've developed over the time, we only had the luxury of pounding the pavement and looking in the local rags where we saw the listings. Then the internet came along and we're getting more and more content, richer and richer data, the ability to take deeper dives into that. But what we're also getting is all of these comments from everyone, and it's quite easy to be overwhelmed, Bryce. It's so easy to be overwhelmed. So I'm going to give a little bit of a guide in regards to how you might sift through all of that content, right? A bit of a trick in terms of, and that is you've got to classify or qualify the quality of the source. If you do not do that, then you may be led down a garden path. And so these are the things that I want you to look for. I want you to look for their level of experience. Okay. I want you to look for their track record. I want you to see if what they're telling you makes sense, common sense. If they're using complicated, difficult things to understand and comprehend, they could be pulling the wool over your eyes. If they're moving quickly through it, if they can't handle objections, if when you push them on purpose, they don't know what they're doing. So that's the final one around why are they, you've got to ask the question, why are they serving? What is their agenda in putting this content out there? Now, if they've got a genuine agenda and a genuine interest in helping others, that's a huge tick. But if there's an element of self-interest or if there's self-interest and self-gain in terms of what they're making and the return that they're getting in terms of the commitment that they're giving to you, well, then those are potentially the triggers that it may not necessarily be that they're the ones you want to be taking that guidance and advice from.
Ben, well said. I think we're in the insights age, not the information age, because we are now overwhelmed by information. So being able to distill it into insights from people that you trust is really, really important, Ben. And I think if you think about Malcolm Gladwell's book around the 10,000 hours, what's interesting is early in that evolution of getting to the 10,000 hours, you would like to think on your journey of understanding, using big words, using technobabble, using jargon is something that you would like to do. But as you get to the back end of the 10,000 hours, you actually do this 180, Ben, and you want to be able to explain what you know in the 9,500 hours, the 9,700 hours, the 9,999 hours. Yeah. By the time you get to the 10,000th hour, you essentially want to be able to explain it as simply as you possibly can. So back in 2,000 hours, you love the jargon, you love the big words, and you love the techie talk. But I think when you're looking for a Yoda, the person who can actually explain it really, really simply knows their stuff really, really well, because they're not trying to bamboozle you with words and talk and platitudes.
Yeah. And they back it up with substance. So once you're having that conversation one-on-one, and then the conversation goes to a technical element, that their subject matter knowledge is thorough. Like a great doctor, right? They'll explain it to you in simple terms, in terms of this is why your body's reacting this way because it's fighting this virus or whatever it's doing. But in reality, they can also say, the platelets of the white blood cells of blood, that they are a subject matter in that if they need to go deeper. But yes, we definitely like the idea of absorbing information in simplistic terms. And if you can do that and back it up with a substance, you've got yourself a great guide and an excellent Yoda.
Very good. So with the Yoda reference, Ben, clearly it's part of Star Wars. There's a book called The Hero's Journey, written by Joseph Campbell. And in that book, it shows you the story arc of any great story. There's 17 elements in that book, Ben. And what George Lucas did when designing the Star Wars movies way back when, Ben, has got each and every one of those 17 elements, which includes a hero, encounters a problem, Ben, goes on a quest, but there's a villain, and there's a whole bunch of things that come through those 17 points. And what's interesting is George Lucas put each and every one of those 17 points in. And then here we are now, some 30 odd years later, made him a billionaire. The franchise is going as strong as ever, and it has these amazing elements of a story. Now, you can actually simplify what's going on for most Hollywood blockbusters, which is why a lot of people get frustrated when the executives, they pitch a project to the executives and they knock it back because if it doesn't follow the formula, it's too risky. It's not going to make some money, which thwarts that artistic creativity. But for any movie, Ben, it really is a hero encounters a problem, meets a guide who gives them a plan, calls them to action, shows them what it looks like if they fail, shows them what it looks like if they succeed. There's the 7 elements of any story, Ben, and it's very simple. That's why we always watch a movie, Ben, and the boy who meets the girl, all of a sudden we think they're going to live happily ever after, and what happens? They break up, and we think, oh, no, it's not working, because you've actually got to show what it looks like if you fail. So you've got to show what's at stake before we then get to the happy ending, right? But what's important in that 7 steps, Ben, is the hero encounters a problem and meets a guide. The guide is the person who navigates them through the call to adventure and the plan that's given to them. So it's no mistake that we think that the Yoda finds a place in rule number 3, Ben, because it's important. If you want to climb Everest, you need to go to base camp, and then there are Sherpas that you meet who walk you up the side of the mountain. So the 7 stages or the 8 stages or however many stages, they know how to get you from one point to the next. So it's really, really important. So by example, Ben, clearly we've had Jamin on. I don't think it's a secret that I've sought him out to help me in personal development, right? But he was the guide to me being the hero in being able to navigate that. He gave me a plan, showed me what it took to have that call to adventure, shows what life looks like if you don't do it. Insecurity left unchecked leads to madness. And on the outside, insecurity that you do get on top of leads to a life unhindered, right? So it's a classic example. So for us, clearly we would like to take the place of the guide for our Couches community, Ben. That's how we've tried to position ourselves all along, to help people with a plan and call them to take on the quest. But clearly, without that, if you're blessed and you're born into a family where your bloodline provides that, that's amazing. But if you don't have any guides in your bloodline, Ben, you've got to look outside of that to actually be able to find them.
And I think, again, you've got to do that work on yourself, Bryce. I mean, there's a quote from, and hopefully, I know I'm going to mess this up, but in terms of who the author of this quote was, it's Johann Wolfgang van Goethe, I think it is pronounced anyway. He says, one only sees what one looks for. One only looks for what one knows. And so what a guide does is they put pressure on that story, right? Because if you think about that, that's the classic case of, climate change is a classic one, or even now. I mean, some people don't believe that the coronavirus is real, right? I mean, again, one only sees what one's looking for. So if they're looking for evidence of climate change is not real, or looking for evidence that the virus is a hoax, or whatever it is, then they will solidify that with, one only looks for what one knows, right? And so they won't explore and open up their mind to other opportunities. So hence they have this closed-minded view, and their world is their own world is worse off for that. And the broader world is worse off for their shallow views of the world. And so whoever your Yoda is, if their job is also to allow you to open your mind and explore other points of view or other opinions, or to give you the tools to allow you to find new knowledge, new understanding from those lessons that are taught. And if you go through life with a closed mind, unfortunately, your life won't be fulfilled, and in a lot of cases there will be a lot of anger and frustration built up in your world. But if you say to yourself, all right, I'm not going to fall into this trap of my mind is 100% right all the time and I'm always correct. Your mind is very deceptive. It's well proven. So make sure that your guide is allowing you to explore and open up your horizons to some views that you have about the world, science, lifestyle, money, investing, and you'll be better served for it.
Ben, as the great Mr. Miyagi would say, Ben, wax on, wax off. And for Daniel-san did not know what wax on, wax off was meaning in the bigger context of all these things. He threw down his jacket, said, I've had enough, I'm out of here. And all of a sudden, Mr. Miyagi started throwing punches. And all of a sudden, he was defending himself like wax on, Ben, like wax off. So sometimes it doesn't make sense, which is why we've gone a little bit abstract here today. And as you said, we haven't gone deep on tactics around the mechanics of money. But the idea here is, we've wanted to give you the version, Mr. Miyagi's version of wax on, wax off, because if you get your head around rule number one around, you've got to do the hard things early, Ben, and then you get to rule number two and realize that it's not a Disney movie, nobody's coming to rescue, and then you get to number three and realize you need to find your Mr. Miyagi, you need to find your Yoda, you need to find your guide to navigate you through to the promised land. Then you will understand what the wax on, wax off actually means for you in terms of what we're doing here, Ben, because clearly our mission is to help people climb the summit of passive income. Our book says $2,000 a week, but for you it could be anything. But ideally, we want to take our audience on that journey and remind them it's a get rich slow scheme, not a get rich quick scheme. But it is pretty straightforward. It's actually not that difficult.
And look, and unlike the movies, because they've got to finish in an hour and a half for box office success, blah blah blah. Your Yoda should be in real life several people, multiple people, subject matters in multiple areas, subject matter experts in their area. That is true. So don't just think it's got to be one person that has all the answers for you, because ultimately the story behind that is you had the answer already in you, right? A great guide should be able to get that confidence to the surface and give you that visibility that you need to take that first step into transforming your life. And in our case, it's financial transformation. That's what we're interested in terms of teaching you to give you that sort of financial piece that you're after. So be mindful of that. You're going to have many Yodas. You're going to have many people, confidants, people that you can trust and open up to, who have your best interests at heart. And sometimes your family members can have your best interest at heart by telling you what you want to hear, not what the truth is. And so when it comes to someone who, there's a saying in business and in negotiation, I care, but just not that much. Like, if you're paying somebody to give you the truth, you want the whole truth and nothing but the truth. If they are your professional advisor, be mindful of that. If they're getting paid in another way, you've then got to ask yourself, well, is that in my best interest? So we keep coming back to, what is their purpose? What is their driver? How are they serving you? And if they're getting financial reward for telling you like it is, and even if the truth sometimes hurts, that's true as well. So just be mindful of that.
Yeah, well said. But you can't really talk about the Yoda without mentioning the false teachers, which is what you're talking about there. If you remember watching the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio, he was playing the con man Frank Abagnale. And when they caught him at the end of it, they said, you actually taught advanced, I think it was sociology or something at college. How did you actually do that? And all he said was, well, what I made sure is I was 1 or 2 chapters ahead of where the class was. And so that's what a false teacher will do. They'll actually just make sure they're only 1 chapter or 2 chapters ahead of you. So it's around getting the wisdom, the experience, so the technical craft and the experience that comes with it, so that you actually are dealing with someone who has real wisdom as opposed to Frank Abagnale's wisdom.
It makes a good point, doesn't it, Bryce, in terms of that's where you see a lot of content coming out in social media and all that now, that it feels like some of those people are only 1 or 2 chapters ahead. They probably haven't had the life skills or the life experiences that others have had. So they're just drawing on what they're gaining themselves and then reverberating that back out there. And I give all acknowledgement for people having a go. But it can be challenging if there's no substance behind their message when times get tough. So that's also an important point.
Yoda needs to be 2 or 3 volumes ahead, doesn't he, Ben? Doesn't need to be 2 or 3 chapters ahead.
He was thousands of years old, wasn't he? I mean, he had wisdom gained over, centuries of life. And that's what he was able to instill. But as he said, the message to Luke Skywalker was always inside you. We just needed to unlock it. And that's the message.
Yeah, the handbrake. You're at the top of the hill. All you got to do is let the handbrake down. It's not as if you're climbing the mountain. So there we go, folks. There's our 3 money rules for life. What do you reckon? Ivis will put something up on socials regarding this episode. We would love to get your feedback on the 3 money rules for life. Let us know if we hit the mark. Let us know if you think that we didn't. So that'd be great, Ben. But I mentioned at the top of the episode that in preparation for launching our audio book that we've bought some books, Ben. So there are limited copies. But again, I just want to remind folks that there will be a note that you can click on the show notes. There'll be a direct link to go to thearmchairguide.com.au. I certainly want to encourage you. If you don't have a book, Ben, that is the first step. If you believe in what we talk about, if you don't, clearly this is not what you need to do. But if you are a member of our community and have been for some time and you don't have a copy of our book, Ben, I'm going to say step number 1 on your journey of transformation is to go and get it. And we're actually making it available. The book's for free. We've bought it. You and I bought it. We just want you to pay for the postage and we'll tell us where to send it. So thearmchairguide.com.au, we would love to give you a book. Go and get one while there's still a copy available for you. I don't think you'll be disappointed, Ben.
No, I mean, it's a framework in how to earn $2,000 a week from passive, boring investing over, a period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Not rocket science. Yep.
Hey folks, my life hack today is, I hinted at it before, the 4-letter F word that landed me a job in television. And if we go back to what my mindset minute was, Ben, the principle is really simply be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves. Now, I am an introvert at heart, Ben. I find it very difficult to be in scenarios where I don't know the rules of the room, Ben. Put me in a business scenario, put me in a property scenario, put me in any of those scenarios that I know the rules of the room, I can chat the lights out, right? But you put me into a social scenario or something like that, I'm mate, just poke my own eye at the sharp stick sometimes. So what I did is I learnt this formula. It's a 4-letter F word. It got me a job in television. It's FORM. We've had Chris Helder on our podcast, Ben, who's got 4 off ROF, which is another version of this. So if you want to circle back to that, you can. But FORM is very, very simply an acronym. FORM. F for family, O for occupation, R for recreation, and M for message, Ben. time doesn't allow for me to say why that landed me a job in television, other than to say, when I went through all the auditions, Ben, I used this principle in the auditions, which set me apart from everyone else, which ultimately landed me the job. But the idea is really, really simple. FORM. So if I am going to meet someone for the first time, I talk about R first, Ben. I model this every single time whenever we're introducing a new staff member. So probably a little message to our team, Ben, who's listening to this. I do it. I walk the talk. When we have a new staff member, we have drinks. There's 50 odd people around, and I do this very thing. I ask them a variation of the question, what would you like to, what are you doing on the weekend when you're not working? Which is code for, tell me what you love to do. Because that is the most simple, easiest thing to ask someone to talk about, because it's very, very simple for them to tell you what they love to do. And look, Ben, if you said, oh, hey, look, I love tennis, I'll go, great. Have you been to Wimbledon? No, I haven't been to Wimbledon, but I was in Europe last year and I was planning to get there, but I never got there. And so in the back of my mind, I go, oh, he's went to Europe last year. So as soon as we finish talking about tennis, Ben, what do I say? Hey, where did you go in Europe? And you'll go, well, I went to France. And I'll go, what was your favorite thing in France? Oh, the Eiffel Tower. Oh, did you get a baguette? And so all of a sudden we can just run for ages on R. And as soon as we run out of R, Ben, what do? Do we go to O? No, we don't go to O. We go to F, which is family. So Ben, tell me, you're younger, you're the younger one, you and Jeremy. There's an older one. Your parents are up on the Murray River. So all of a sudden I will find out as much as I can about you and your family, because I've built rapport with you, finding out about what you love, Ben. So then at the end of that, once we've gone from family, the last thing we'll do is we'll go to occupation. Because what do you like to do when you're not working is the safest way to go. The unsafest way is to ask person first up what they do for a living, Ben, because it's a 50-50 game. Because if someone loves what they do, no problem. If someone doesn't like what they do, they don't want to talk about it. But the problem with us blokes, Ben, is we do it for a chest puffing exercise. We go, what do you do for a living? Because I want to see if what I'm doing is better than what you're doing, right? So therefore, it starts the conversation on the back foot between us blokes. So not a good place to start. So start where people love talking about, find out if there's common interest. Because the M, Ben, becomes the message of, hey, do we have enough in common, Ben, that we should hang out again? You love footy, I love footy. You love property, I love property. You love talking about how to grow, I love talking about how to grow. We should hang out. And so lo and behold, we've been mates for the last 10 years, right? So on the alternative is we have a really great chat, Ben, but I realise that you love playing backgammon and I can't stand backgammon. And you love
apology for all those backgammon players out there.
you love learning obscure yoga techniques from the Far East, and I don't. You know what I mean, Ben? So yes. I quickly work out that we don't have enough in common.
Yeah.
That we shouldn't chat again. But here's the deal, right? And here's the point of the whole chapter, Ben. That if you do that well, and for most people, they're oblivious to the fact that if I controlled that conversation, we're talking totally about them. I feel very confident I can get 30 minutes minimum as a conversation. I reckon with the experience that I've now used, is I can get it easily to an hour. At the end of it, they'll walk away, they'll turn to someone else and they'll say, geez, that bloke was a good conversationalist. I really enjoyed chatting with him. But the moral of the story is they probably didn't ask me anything about me, Ben. The whole 30 to 60 minutes was all about them. So if we go back to the Mindset Minute, principle number 7 was be a good listener, encourage others to talk about themselves. So I've just now given you the formula, Ben, that I used to get a job in television, which you can now use no matter what scenario, the barbecue, the picnic, the new job interview, wherever you find yourself and you're talking to someone new. If you want to apply principle number 7, use that formula. There you go, Ben.
Bryce, I'm smiling. I've used your name and I've been a good listener.
Mate, I'm impressed. This book's rubbing off on you, Ben. This will make you a very, very good conversationalist, Ben. So what's making property news?
What's making property news, Bryce, is the good people of, let me get it up here, Knight Frank Global House Price Index was released for the second quarter of 2020, Bryce. So this is basically looking at some of the biggest countries in the world, or all the biggest countries in the world, developed nations, how their property prices going in the middle of a pandemic. So I'll just read off a couple at the very top. And where do you think Australia sits, Bryce? I should ask that. We're definitely in the top 50. Let me see the number here. There's 56 in the top list. where do you reckon they sit in terms of what's happened to property prices for the second quarter of 2020 compared to, where do we rank in terms of capital growth?
Top 10.
No, we're out of the top 10.
Okay.
So this is
based
on.
Set me up like this.
Oh no, I know it's terrible, isn't it?
56. Could have given me like a smaller bandwidth. Yeah.
We're in the top 20. How does that sound? There you go.
All right, there you go. That was my next guess.
So look, I'll start with. So this is the change over the last 12 months. So quarter 2 2019, quarter 2 2020. So Turkey is leading the pack with a 25.7% increase in capital value of their property market in that 12 months. The 6-month change has been 17.4 and the 3-month change has been 11.2. What coronavirus? Yeah. Luxembourg had 13.9% over 12 months. They had 6% in 6 months, and they had 3.8% in the last 3 months. Then it goes Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, Ukraine, Czech Republic, Latvia, Croatia. So a lot going on in that Eastern European bloc there, right? They're now good neighbours of the long white cloud. New Zealand come in at number 11 at 9.1% growth in the 6 months. They've had 1.6. In the last 3 months, it's been negative 4.1. Australia came in at 19th price. Ooh. So we've had 6.1% growth nationally based on their data, a negative 4% change over the last 6 months, and a negative 2% change in the last in the second quarter of the year. Now, what is fascinating about this price in terms of the 56 countries, in terms of negative growth over the last 3 months, like you'd be thinking, gee, global pandemic, how many are going to be in negative? Well, I can tell you that it sits at around 9 out of the 56 are in negative. That's crazy. I would never have picked that in the last quarter. That I would have thought property prices would have been impacted significantly across all markets. And now, who did come in at number 56 price is Hong Kong. Wow. Now, Hong Kong, here's basically a two systems based under China's rule, two systems, democratic system and obviously the socialist system of China. They've had a bit of political trouble over there, right? We've had a few problems going on, lots of violence, and a system that really does look like there may not be two systems into the future, right? You'd be thinking their property price market would be in a bit of strife, pandemic and everything else that's going on. Well, over the last 12 months, it's only dropped negative 2.8. And in fact, in the last quarter, it's up 1.6%. Wow. So who would have thought? So just
how's that possible based on all the headlines, Ben?
I know, it's crazy. Anyway, so we'll put that one in the show notes. It's a bit of fun reading it in terms of what's happening globally in the house price index market. So there you go. So that's what's been happening this week in property market price.
Oh, I like it, Ben. Hey, listen, can I add a little bit to the dialogue here as well?
Sure, join in.
There's an article here from REA by Stephanie McLean, and how COVID-19 has reset the property conversation, Ben, and it's really interesting, right? Because in the last 6 months compared to the 6 months prior, they've got some topics, and the 200% increase has been open homes, followed by about 150 increase for landlords, 50% increase for renters, 40% increase for rental prices, then listing, stamp duty and auctions round that out on the increase. On the decrease, housing stock, bubble, interest rates, housing affordability, Ben, capital gains.
So that's all key search. That's all key search words. Yeah.
So
interesting.
Which is interesting. And then they go talk of house price falls has risen, and because prior to COVID it was all about the price rises. Yep. So the price falls in the news has increased by 40%, and price rises has decreased by 33%. Mentions of sellers are up 20%. Mentions of buyers are down 9%, although still more mentions of buyers overall. So it's really interesting that what's fallen off the radar, Ben, is economy, financial growth, China, the Reserve Bank. They're the words that are no longer, but the increase the words most. You know those word diagrams, Ben, with the larger word, the more. So the biggest word is COVID, right? No surprises there. But coronavirus, restriction, lockdown, cases, Victoria, border, Melbourne. So the dialogue has well and truly changed, Ben. It's official.
A little positive, Bryce. We saw another really nice spike in the consumer sentiment survey from Westpac Melbourne Institute yesterday. So and I think that comes into, people's acceptance that we're living with this and we're going to get on with it. Still obviously below 100, so still a lot more pessimists than optimists at the moment, but a nice, it's been bouncing around, but that's another increase. So hopefully we'll continue to build on that gain as we get our societies opened up, hopefully in the next month or so down here in Vic.
Yeah, a little shout out to our Victorian friends down here, Ben, who are going into a little bit further lockdown, which is a challenge for everyone. So shout out to those folks. Hey, Ben, 3 money rules for life. We hope that that's served and added value to the community today. We'd certainly love some feedback, Ben, on how that's gone. But, mate, it's always good to catch up with you on a Thursday. I enjoy shooting the breeze. We don't get to bump shoulders these days. We just bump Zoom shoulders because you're in stage 4, I'm in stage 3. But, mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.